Good morning, everyone, and welcome to session 2 of our online AD Manager Plus workshop series. Before I get started, sorry for the delay. We had a bit of a technical issue, so let's get straight into today's session. Do let me know if you have any issues with the audio. I will, if you have any issues, do put it in the chat box. Okay, so let's get started with today's session. So let's get started with today's session. So this is the second session in our online Migrate Manager Plus workshop series. In the first session, we looked at the user provisioning process. So we looked at how we could create users in Active Directory, as well as how we could provision mailboxes in Exchange, create the corresponding user in Office 365, and also, okay, sorry. So that was in in session 1. In today's session, we'll be looking at the next step. So in Active Directory user lifecycle, we have multiple steps. There are mainly 3 steps. We have the creation process, and then after the user is created in Active Directory, we have the modification. And then finally, the third step would be to, after creating, we have to delete the users. So if any user leaves the organization, then we'd want to delete the user as well. So in week 1, we looked at the first step. That is the user creation process. Now in today's session, we'll be looking at steps 2 and 3, how we can manage these users, as well as how we can delete them when the user has been when the user leaves the organization. So let me introduce myself. My name is Naveen, and I am part of the AD Manager Plus engineering team here at AD Solutions. So so let's take a look at the topics we'll be handling today. Now, we'll first start, like I said, we'll be looking at the user modification process in Active Directory. So not only Active Directory, we'll also be looking at how we can modify the Exchange attributes and the Office 365 licenses as well. So this is the agenda for today's session. We'll start off by seeing how we can update users' group memberships automatically when the department changes. So we'll have users who keep moving between various departments. So if a user is promoted from, say, the HR, from department 1 to department 2, in that case, the user's group memberships will change. So if the user is going to be a part of the IT team, then they probably need admin access in Active Directory. So we'll see how we can automatically update the group memberships when the user's department is changed. Okay, then let's move on to the second topic. So after that, we'll be looking at how we can move users' home folders when we decommission file servers. So what I mean here is, if a file server is decommissioned, then all the home folders present in that file server need to be moved to our new file server. So we'll see how this can be done with a very basic CSV file. So yesterday we saw what CSV files were. Now with the help of a very basic CSV file, we'll be making these modifications. And then we'll also look at the user deprovisioning cycle. So each organization will have its own steps for when it comes to user deprovisioning. So some organizations might want the user to be first moved to a particular OU. So if an employee resigns, then that user account is moved to an OU. And then after a couple of days, we disable the user account. And then finally, we go on to a deletion process. So this basically varies for every organization. So it doesn't really, so you can configure it whichever way suits you. Okay, then we'll see how we can enforce uniform naming formats and update users' primary and secondary SMTP addresses while merging domains. What I mean here is, say 2 organizations are going to merge. then they might have different formats for their AD attributes. So in organization one, the naming attributes might be of the format first name dot last name, but the second organization might have it as last name dot first name. So in this case, we'll want to have a common naming format. So we'll see how we can enforce uniform naming formats to all the users in bulk. So that is related to the Active Directory modification. There are a lot more operations that can be done. So for now, we'll look at them as well. Now we'll move on to the Exchange server operations. So in Exchange server, we'll first see how we can modify the primary and secondary SMTP addresses. Okay, sorry. So we'll see how we can modify the SMTP addresses. So we'll be doing this in bulk. So when we modify the SMTP addresses, we can also apply the naming formats as well. We can either, so there are two ways. We can either manually type out all the users' SMTP addresses, or we can use the naming formats that we used before. And then we'll look at how we can migrate Exchange mailboxes in bulk after we upgrade an Exchange server. So say you're using Exchange 2010 and you're upgrading it to Exchange Server 2016, then you will want to migrate all your mailboxes from the 2010 server to the 2016 server. So we'll look at how that can be done with the help of AD Manager Plus. Also, we'll see how we can archive Exchange mailboxes of disabled Active Directory user accounts. And finally, we'll end up with seeing how we can check for the inactive users in our Office 365 environment, and we'll see how we can free up the licenses. So if a user is inactive in Office 365 and they're assigned a license, then that's one license less for the entire organization. So we want to generate a report for all the users who are inactive and perform some license management operations for them. Okay, so that's a brief overview of what we'll be covering in today's session. Let's go ahead and start today's workshop. Okay, so for showing you the operations in AD Manager Plus, I have a local installation configured here. So in if you have a test lab set up, you can make use of that test environment and perform the actions as I'm performing them. So it'll be much easier to understand if you perform these actions. So if you do not have a test lab though, you can use our online AD Manager Plus setup. So I'll share the link in the chat box. So if you look at your chat box, okay, yeah. So I've sent the demo setup link in the chat window. If you can make use of this setup and perform the actions as well. So that is if you don't have a local installation. If you have a local installation, you can very well use that. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to log into the product now. So I hit login. Okay, like I said yesterday, once we log into AD Manager Plus, we're greeted with the product's dashboard. So the dashboard gives us some basic information about our Active Directory environment. So we can do some very basic troubleshooting with this. So like we can see the number of inactive users from here, and based on that, we can perform some actions. Okay, so let me go to the AD Management tab now. Oh yeah, so yesterday what we looked at was creating users in Active Directory. So we looked at 360-degree user provisioning. We were creating the users in AD, O365, Exchange Server, Link, as well as in GApps. So today we'll be looking at how we can modify these users. So once the user has been created, we'll have lots of requests for modifying user attributes. So we'll be looking at that today. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I have a sample user account that's been created. So I'm going to be performing all the operations on this sample user account. So before getting started with the modification operations, let's take a look at this user account. So right now, I'm just going to view the attributes configured for this user account. So for this, I go to modify single user. So I click on modify single user. So my user account is called workshop user. So I just search. So now I modify it. Okay. So now what's happening is we're getting all the user attributes from Active Directory. So you'll see that the user's first name is workshop, the last name is user, and we can also see the logon name, the pre-Windows 2000 logon name, etc. We can also see that the user is in the users container. So now let's navigate to the account tab. Okay. So again, every time a tab is clicked, the product will communicate with Active Directory and it will fetch all the details for this user. So currently, this user is only a member of the domain users group. So now, yeah, the user is only a member of the domain users group. Now let's go to the contact tab. Now the contact tab is for the manager attribute. I'm going to see who has been configured as a manager. So currently there is no manager configured for this user. Now, this is the most important tab. So for now, we'll be looking at the Exchange tab. So here we can see some of the Exchange related attributes. So we can see the mail server, the mailbox store, the email alias, etc. So all of these values have been taken from Exchange, from the Exchange server, and are being populated in this layout here. Now, if I want to make some basic modification operations, all I have to do is go to the appropriate field and click on and type my new value. So if I want to change the email alias to workshop user 1, I would enter that value. And then similarly, I can modify any other attribute that is displayed in this layout. So after doing that, I can if I scroll down, there's an option to preview. So preview tells me what values have been changed for this user. And then after that, I can go ahead and so yeah, now it's just comparing the existing values and telling me what has been changed. So you can see that the email alias has been changed from workshop user to workshop user 1. Now if I click on update user, it will communicate with Active Directory and modify the email alias for me. Okay, so for right now, I'm going to concentrate on the additional email addresses attribute. So this here is the proxy addresses attribute. If you go to Active Directory and go to attribute editor, this attribute will be listed as proxy addresses. So currently this user has the following proxy addresses configured. So what we're going to see first is how we can modify these proxy addresses in bulk. So we'll be seeing how we can set a primary SMTP address as well as a secondary SMTP address with the help of a CSV file. Okay, another important attribute that I'd like to mention is the Windows logon name pre-Windows 2000. So in Active Directory, this attribute will be listed as the SAM account name. So when we modify our users with the help of CSV files, we'll be using this SAM account name attribute for searching for in Active Directory. Now, the reason I'm using the SAM account name attribute for searching is the SAM account name is always unique. In a domain, there cannot be two users who have the same SAM account name. So if I use that in my search criteria, I will always get a unique result. So for this purpose, I will be using the SAM account name in my CSV. Okay, so now let's take a look at the CSV file. So what I wanted to show is the current SAM account name value is workshop user, and the additional email addresses are given here. So now let's see how we can modify the proxy addresses. So for this, I have a CSV file created here. So the CSV file, so the first line of my CSV file contains the headers. So the SAM account name and the proxy addresses. Okay, so the SAM account name will be used for searching for this user in Active Directory, and the proxy addresses will have the value that I'm going to change to. So I can go ahead and give my SMTP addresses here. So if I have a prefix of capital SMTP, that means the value will be the primary SMTP address. So let me give a primary SMTP address, workshop.user@domain.com. And I'm also going to give a secondary SMTP address. So that we can give as workshop test at domain1.com, and I hit save. So what the CSV file tells me is I'm going to search for the user whose SAM account name is workshop user and change the proxy addresses for that user to what is displayed here. So this is the basic CSV file. Now let's see how we can make use of this CSV file in AD Manager. So I minimize it and go back to the product. So I navigate to AD Management. And in user management, if you look at the top right, there's an option to modify users. So under CSV Import, I can modify the users. So let's click on that. Okay, so now what I have to do is I have to import my CSV file. So I click on Import. I choose File. Click OK. So now the user details have been imported. So if I had multiple users, so this isn't limited to a single user. If you wanted to modify the SMTP addresses of multiple users, you just give the details and the consecutive lines. So if I want to modify for another user, say workshop user 1, and I'd give my SMTP addresses here. So for now, I'm just going to configure 1. So after import, I just choose the appropriate users and click Update in AD. So now I have this other dialog box that opens. So the first thing it asks me is select attributes that are to be modified. So what I want to modify is the proxy addresses. I do not want to modify my SMTP address, SAM account name, only the proxy addresses. And next it asks me for the match criteria. So which attribute will be used to search for the users in Active Directory. So I'll be using my SAM account name attribute here. Now if we open the advanced options, we have 2 additional options. So we can either append values. So the proxy addresses is a multi-value attribute. So if I check this option, the existing values will not get overwritten. These 2 values present here will be added to the current proxy addresses. So I do not want to do that. I want to replace my proxy addresses. So I uncheck append values. And the other option is to clear the attributes value in AD if the value in the CSV is empty. So if I remove this value from here, then and I check this option, then the proxy addresses value would be cleared in Active Directory. So I do not want to do that, so I uncheck that as well. And finally, I can just click OK. So now my proxy addresses are being modified in my Exchange server. Okay, so it's been successfully updated. Now let's just go ahead and check what the values are actually in Active Directory. So for this, again, I go to modify single user and I search for my user and modify. So now I want to navigate to the Exchange tab and check my additional email addresses attribute. So it's communicating with the Exchange and getting all the values. Okay, so you can see that the workshop user, so it looks like I made a mistake here. So if you want to give multiple values in your CSV file, sorry, this is my mistake, you have to separate them with semicolons. So I've given a comma, you have to use semicolons. So what it's done is it's taken the entire value from the CSV file and set it as an attribute. Okay, so let's just try that again then. Modify single user, import CSV, click OK. Okay. AD. Okay. Okay, so the values have been successfully updated now. Okay, so that is one way of modifying the proxy addresses. So this is actually a bit tedious. If we have multiple users, then we have to manually give each user's SMTP address here. So if you had 2 or 3 SMTP addresses per user, and say there were 100 users, we'd have to type the email address for close to 300 users. So that'll take a lot of time. So instead of that, there's another way this can be done. So for this, we go to AD Management. And under AD Management, we have the Modify SMTP address here. So this option can be used for modifying multiple users' SMTP addresses in bulk. So AD management, exchange management, and modify SMTP addresses. Okay, so I have to modify my CSV file here. So I won't be providing the proxy addresses value in my CSV file. That value will be set here in the layout itself, in the UI. So I click on the add button here and click and add my SMTP addresses. So I do not require that in the CSV file. So I just get rid of that and keep only the SAM account name. So I save that. Okay, so now let's first add a couple of proxy addresses. So additional email address. I click on mailbox enable user and add. Okay, so I'm going to give my primary SMTP address as given name. So given name means the first name of the user. So the user that I search for with the SAM account name, that user's first name will be a part of the SMTP address. And then I give SN. Okay, so let me just explain what this means. What I'm saying is the primary SMTP address of this user is going to be first name dot last name at domain.com. So the reason I'm using given name here is Active Directory only understands LDAP attributes. So the LDAP attribute for first name is given name. So whenever I want to make use of that, I have to specify a given name here. Similarly, the LDAP attribute for last name is SN. So I mentioned that here as well. And I click OK. Now let me quickly just add another secondary SMTP address. So for that, I give a small SMTP. And here I want to give last name dot first name at domain.com. And I click OK. So now I have given my values for the proxy addresses. I just have to import my CSV file. So I click on CSV import and choose the file here. I click on it and then click go. So now my user has been imported. I just click on check all and go to apply. So now the proxy addresses are being modified for this user. Okay, so there's an error that is being displayed. So what it says is one of the email addresses is already being used. So let's just take a look. So I go to AD management, modify single user, search for workshop user. Okay, so I just have to navigate to my Exchange tab and view my additional email addresses. Okay, looks like it's taking so. Okay, so you can see the values here. So there's a SMTP as workshop.user and another one as workshop test at domain1.com. So these were given in our CSV file. So the one we had given previously when we tried it through the management action, that could not be set. So if the SMTP address is not already configured, then the operation would have been a success. So AD Manager Plus can also tell you if some error occurs. So in this case, there was already a email address assigned to the user, and when we tried to add it again, it gave us the appropriate error message. Okay, so that's how we can modify our primary and secondary SMTP addresses for multiple users in bulk. We can either provide the SAM account name and the email addresses in the CSV file, and then make use of the modify users action. Or another way is we just give our SAM account name here in the CSV file and use the modify SMTP addresses function here. So modifying SMTP addresses in bulk is much easier than using the CSV import. The sole reason being, I do not have to manually enter the email addresses for every single user. If I have a fixed naming format, say first name dot last name, I can just provide that and it will modify it for all the users. Okay, so now let's go move on to our next topic. So next we're going to see how we can migrate mailboxes to different Exchange servers. So under AD management, user management, if I navigate down to the Exchange tasks, there's an option called migrate mailbox. So this feature will allow me to migrate mailboxes from one Exchange server to another. Now, doing this again is very simple. All I need is a CSV file that has the fingerprint attribute, SAM account name. So SAM account name will always return unique values. So I give that in the CSV file. And I just click on migrate mailboxes. So here it asks me to choose my target Exchange server. So all the Exchange servers configured in your environment would be listed here. And you just had to choose the appropriate one from the list. And then you can choose the mailbox database as well. Now, after doing this, you just click on CSV Import. Again, we just choose the file and go. So all the users present list in the CSV file will be listed here. So I click on the appropriate one and then click Apply. So if I clicked on Apply, this user's mailbox would be migrated to this Exchange server and to this target mailbox database as well. So it's very simple. If we want to remove multiple users, we just provide those users' SAM account names in the CSV file, and we can perform the operation. Now, all these actions are very similar. We just need a very basic CSV file, and we're good to go. If the CSV file has the SAM account name, it's much better because it's unique. So all of these, most of these operations only need that. We just need a simple CSV file, and we can choose the appropriate values in the action itself. So let's see how we can archive a user's mailbox. So for archiving mailboxes under Exchange tasks, we have create/archive user mailbox. So let me click on that. Okay, so here it asks me to select a format for the mail alias. So if you want to, so these are a list of naming formats that you can use. So if I want the mail alias to be first name plus last name or last name plus first name, I can make the appropriate choice here. So we can also create our own naming formats. So if you have a naming format that is not listed here, you can always use the create your own format link here. So in that case, you can create your own custom format, and there are lots of different ways in which we can do this. So if you want to add random numbers to the format, or if you want to add only some letters of the name, then all that can be done. So just I suggest that you go to create your own naming format, explore the different options, and use whichever suits your need. So I choose the appropriate format, and again, now I choose my Exchange server and mailbox store. Now what I want to do is I want to enable an archive mailbox for this user. So I just set the values here and import my CSV file. I do that and click go. Now again, from the list, I choose my appropriate users and click apply. So if I click on apply, then the archive mailbox will be created for this user account. Okay, so that was a brief overview of some of the exchange-related operations we can do in AD Manager Plus. So you can see that there are multiple other actions as well. So we can't cover all of them in a 1 hour session. So again, like I said, you can just go through the features that we provide and see how to make use of them. They're all very simple. It's just providing the values in the action and then importing a CSV file. Okay, so now let's look at some other features. We'll go to the Active Directory user management. So we're going to first see how we can enforce uniform naming formats across the organization. So for this, there's under bulk user modification, there's an option called naming formats. So I click on naming formats. So this is for modifying the naming attributes in Active Directory. So the display name, the full name, the logon name, and the pre-Windows 2000 logon name can all be modified from here. So if I want to give a different value for them, I can just choose the correct format from here. So the display name, I want to set the display name as the first letter of the first name plus the last name. So I've already created a format for this. and I just choose it from the list. I want all of my attributes to have the same value. So I only want to modify the display name and full name, so I provide the appropriate values there. Now again, I can import CSV. So you will notice that there's another option here. We can import a CSV file, or we can manually search for the users. So if I search for my user here, enter the name of my user here, and click search, then I will be able to view those users will be listed. So I can form like a criteria, and the results will be displayed based on that. So I just type out my username here and click search. So this option is available in all the bulk user modification actions. So it's listed my user here. So these values have been taken directly from Active Directory. So the current value of the full name is workshop user, and the current value of the display name is again workshop user. So I'm going to be changing it to the new value. So after the users are displayed, I just choose the appropriate ones and click apply. Okay, so it says the values have been successfully modified. So you'll notice that the full name has been changed to the W user, and here the workshop user. So let's go and check in modify single user. So I search for workshop user. So now it's again communicating with Active Directory and getting me all the values. So the full name has been changed to W user as well as the display name. So similarly, we can modify the other values as well. If you want to modify the Windows 2000 logon name or the logon name, those can be set as well. So it's not limited to a single user. You can search for multiple users and perform the actions for all of them. Okay, so let me go get to the most important part of today's session. So I said that we'll be looking at the user deprovisioning process that might be followed. So I'm going to have a sample process. So what I will be doing is, if a user is going to be removed from Active Directory, I won't immediately delete the user. My company will have a set of steps that need to be followed. Only after all of these steps have been done, can I actually delete the user. So for this example, let me have 3 steps. So first, I will disable my user, and then after 10 days, I will remove the user from all the security groups, and then finally, I will go ahead and delete the user. So like I said, this can vary. So let's see how this can be done. So first, we're going to disable the user. So under bulk user modification, we have the enable/disable users option here. So I click on that. So here I just have to choose whether I want to enable or disable my user. Now again, I just choose my CSV file, click go, and choose the appropriate users and hit apply. So now the product is communicating with Active Directory and disabling the user. So it has been successfully modified. So this is the first step. So that's pretty simple. We just go to enable/modify users, choose the appropriate values, import a CSV, and then just click apply. So we also have an option to choose when the account expires as well. So here we can either choose never or at the end of a certain date. So we can configure that here. But in my example, I'm not going to set that. I just want to disable the account. Now let's go to the second step. We want to remove the user from all the security groups. So for this, there's an off feature called group attributes. So this will allow me to modify the member of attribute for my users. So there are 3 options here. I can either add the user to some groups, remove the user from groups, and I can also set a primary group. So what I might need here is to clear all the group memberships. So for this workshop user, it has been disabled. Now my next step is to remove the user from all the security groups. So I click on search. Now, so every time this happens, every time we search for a user, it goes to Active Directory and gets the values for me. So I choose the appropriate users and click apply. So the user is not part of any group other than the primary group. So if, say, this user was a part of multiple security groups, then it would be removed from all of them. Since this particular user is not a member of these groups, this message has been displayed. So this is what I want. I want the user to be removed from all my groups. Okay, now the final step, that is actually deleting the user. So for that, there is an option that says reads delete users. So it's pretty self-explanatory. It just deletes the user in Active Directory. So there are no options that we have to choose. We just import our CSV file, click go. Now all of these users that I select will be deleted in Active Directory. So if I hit apply, then this user will be deleted from my Active Directory environment. Now you may ask, what if I accidentally delete a user from Active Directory? Is there a way AD Manager Plus can restore this user? Yes, we have a way, and that is here. So on the right side, you'll see there's a feature called Restore Deleted Users. So what if I have deleted a user from Active Directory, but I want to restore it, then I would use this feature. So I click on Restore Deleted User, and it says that all the attributes can be restored only for Windows Server 2008 R2 domains. Domain function level for this is 2008. So only the mandatory attributes will be restored. So this message again is pretty self-explanatory. Only if I have a only if I have Windows Server 2008 R2 or higher will I be able to restore all my attributes. Otherwise, I can restore only the mandatory attributes. So in this case, if I were to restore a user, only the mandatory attributes would be restored. Okay, so again, it's the same. I can either import my CSV or search for the user, and that user would be restored. Okay, so far we looked at how we could modify some of the Exchange attributes. That is, we looked at how we could modify the SMTP addresses, how we could enable an archive for a mailbox, and how we can migrate mailboxes between different Exchange server versions. Okay, so now and then after that we looked at some of the user modification operations, like how we could remove the user from groups, how we can also add to groups, how we can enable or disable users, delete users, as well as we saw how we can restore the deleted users. Now finally, before the last AD operation we're going to look at will be move/delete home folders. So if we are going to decommission a certain file server, then that file server will have multiple folders configured in it. So our users' home folders might be present on that file server. So in this case, we'll want to move these home folders from the old location to our new file server. So for this, we have this option to move/delete home folders. So I click on that. So there are two options here. I can either move the home folder or I can delete the home folder. So if I want to delete, it's very straightforward. I just choose that option and the home folder will get deleted for me. But here I don't want to do that. I just want to move the home folder. So to do that, I choose that option here, move home folder to, and I just provide my shared path. So say the home folders are on a server called file server. So I just type out the shared path here, and uh, then there's also an option to retain a copy in the original location. So if this option is checked, the original home folder will still be retained in the same location. But if I uncheck it, then the old home folder will be deleted. Only the new home folder will be present. And this will be assigned to the user as well. So similarly, we can also move the profile path for the user. So again, we just have to provide the shared path here, and it will move the profile path to the mentioned path. And again, it's the same as before. I just choose my CSV file, I import it, choose the appropriate users, and click on apply. Now, after this is done, all the home folders for those users will be moved to the new location. Okay, so that was a brief overview of the Active Directory attributes. You'll see that there are many more attributes that can be changed. So you can, like I said, please do go and use the product, see how these see how these actions are done. And if you have any questions, you can always get back to us and we'll be glad to help. Okay, so now before getting to the Office 365 license management, let's see how we can modify some attributes based on some conditions. So I'm going to have a simple use case here. If my user is moved from, say, the HR department to the IT admins department, then what I want to do is I want to modify the user's OU name as well as the member of attributes. So before going to this, let me take my test user. So I just search for the user here, workshop user. Now let me check what the current department is. So based on this, we'll create a new template. So in the last session, we saw how we could create templates for user creation. Today, we'll be looking at how we can create user modification templates. Again, here we can set some default attributes for the user, or we can set some conditions as well. So the department will be under the contact tab. So yeah, so currently there's no department configured. Let me just choose a department as human resources. Okay, so let me quickly check the OU name as well as the group memberships. Oops. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to set the department as human resources, and just before changing anything, check the container. So current container is the user's container, and let's check the member of now. So member of in the account tab, it's member of only the domain users group. And the contact, we're going to set the department. So I just choose that, human resources, and click update user. Now the department of this user is set as human resources. Okay, so like what's happening here is it is communicating with Active Directory and setting the department for this particular user. Okay, so it's completed. Now the department has been set as human resources. Now let's see how we can create templates to dynamically update the different attributes. So for this, under user management, we have user modification templates. So I click on user modification templates and I create a new template. Now this template is very similar to the one we saw yesterday. Again, we have various fields and we can provide some default values here. For the naming attributes, we can provide our naming formats if we require, and we can also set some default values. If you want to set a default container name, you can set that here. Also, you can customize this template as well. If you click on enable drag and drop, then you can move the fields wherever you require. And you can also delete fields. So if you do not want some technicians to have access to some fields, then you can delete the corresponding field from the layout. And when the technician uses this template, they will not have access to that attribute. So that will be covered in more detail when we handle delegation. So at the top, you'll see there's an AD delegation option. We'll be looking at how we can do that. We'll be looking at this in more detail in our fourth session. Okay, so what I said is I want to create some conditions, and if the conditions are satisfied, then I want to set some attributes. So for this, if you look at the left, there's something called modification rules. So this is used for setting conditions as well as rules. So I have to create a new rule here. So I click on create new rule. So I have a condition, and if this condition is satisfied, then I will assign appropriate values. So let me add condition first. So my condition is if the department is changed to information technology. So currently the user is part of the human resources department. If the department is changed to information and technology, then the following values have to be assigned. So here we have a list of various values that we can assign. So my requirement for now is I just want to change the OU and the member of attributes. So I click on select container and then change. So again, it's populating the pop-ups from Active Directory. I get a tree view of the different OUs present. So I have the IT admin USA OU. So I select that and click OK. Now I add an additional value that is for the member of. So I click on add and it gets added. Now the next one is member of. So I select member of and edit. So I add the appropriate groups. So I'm just going to make some random selections here. And I click OK and OK. And then add that as well. So this is a very basic rule. If the department is information and technology, then I want the container to be set as IT admin USA and the member of attributes to be set as below. So we can also configure additional rules. So if you have multiple rules that need to be, so based on so whichever is satisfied, that value will be taken. So if you have one rule and it is not satisfied, it will go to the next rule. So if this is satisfied, it will assign the appropriate values. So for now, I'm just going to have a single rule. And I give a name for my template. And click Save. So now I've saved my template. Now let's see how we can make use of this template in our user modification process. So for this, I have to go to User Management and modify single user. So from the list, I just search for my user and click on Edit. Okay, so now at the top, you'll remember that there is an option for selecting the template. By default, it is using the system template. So I can click on this and change it. So the template I created is called test template. So I select that and click OK. So now my rules will be applied. If the certain conditions are satisfied, the values will be changed. So right now, the user is still a part of the HR department, so the OU name has not changed. Let's change the department and see what happens. So the department again is in the contact tab. So I click on that and change my value. So now the department has been changed to information and technology. And so now we go to the general tab and see this container has been changed to OU IT admins USA. So this was done automatically. I did not manually change the container value. When the department was changed, since the rule was satisfied, it assigned the values according to the template. So let's just check the member of values as well. So I click on the account tab for the member of values. Okay, so you can see that that has changed as well. Previously, the user was only a member of the domain users group. Now the additional values have been set from the template. So this is not limited to just a member of and container attribute. You would have seen that there were multiple attributes that can be configured. So you can have any number of rules. There's no restriction on the number of rules or number of conditions. So we don't restrict those. So you can have any number of rules, and based on the priority, it will be set. Okay, so this is how we can dynamically update values for our Active Directory users. What we did is when the department of a user is changed, then we dynamically change the user's container as well as group. So this was done with the help of a template. Okay, now let's get to the final topic of today's session. That is license management in Office 365. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate a report to see which of my Office 365 users have been inactive for a certain number of days, for more than a certain number of days. And I will be removing all the licenses for those users. So for this, we go to the Office 365 tab. So if we go to Office 365, under user reports, we have the inactive user reports. So I click on that. So this report will tell me which users have been inactive for the specified number of days. So we have three default options. We can choose 30, 60, or 90. And if you also want to set a custom period, that can be set as well. So for now, I'm going to generate the report to see which of my users were inactive for the last 30 days. So I just choose the value here and click generate. So now what's happening is the product is communicating with Office 365 and is comparing the last logon, the time the user last logged on. So if that value is more than 30 days before today, then those users will be listed here. Okay, so it looks like the report is generating. So now I know which of my users have been inactive for more than 30 days. So there's only one. So there are multiple user accounts. All of them would be listed. Now you'll see that there's an option to revoke all licenses right here in the report itself. So all I'd have to do is choose the appropriate user and click revoke all licenses. So if I did this, then this user would have all of its licenses removed. Say you do not want to remove all the licenses. You want to perform some other action. So we have a list of actions here. Just choose the appropriate action from the list and click go. So you can assign or remove licenses and click go. So now I have multiple options here. I can add licenses, I can replace licenses, I can remove the selected licenses or remove all licenses. And I can also modify the user's usage location. So I just make the appropriate selection and click apply. So when this is done, whatever licenses are assigned to this user will all be removed if this option is selected. Okay, so that concludes today's workshop session. So let me just give a quick recap of what we saw today. Oops. Okay, so we saw how we could update users group membership automatically when their department was changed. So this was accomplished by creating a user modification template. So in the template, we had created a rule. So in the rule, we said if the user's department is information and technology, then assign the OU name as such and the group membership as well. So then we can go to navigate to the user, apply the template, and once the department is changed, the other attributes get updated as well. Then we saw how to move users' home folders while decommissioning file servers. So all we needed for this was a basic CSV file and the new shared location for the home folders. So the new file server will be creating the home folders. So we just need to mention that shared path and the home folders will be moved. Then we also saw how we can deprovision users and restore them at a later point in time. So we didn't just cover the deprovisioning process, we also looked at the steps that are done here. So like I said, the different organizations might have different structures. So in our example, we first disable the user, then remove the users from all the security groups, and then we finally deleted the user. And we also saw how we can restore these deleted users if that is required. Then we saw how we can enforce uniform naming formats and update users' primary and secondary addresses while merging domains. So we saw this, we did this using two methods. In the first one, we manually type in the user's primary and secondary SMTP address in the CSV file itself. So we had two headers, a SAM account name and proxy addresses. So the SAM account name was for telling mention the user that we wanted to search for. And the proxy addresses were the new values which we are going to set. So we imported the CSV file, then we chose which attributes we wanted to modify. And then we just clicked update. So once that was done, the primary SMTP addresses were updated. Then the other way we saw was we just had a very basic CSV file. So in this CSV file, we only had the SAM account name. Now, once the SAM account name is given, that is just used for searching. The SMTP addresses were given in the UI itself. So we can configure any format we require. So in our example, we chose firstname.lastname @domain.com. And we can add multiple SMTP addresses as well. So all of those will be created for the user. Then we saw how we can migrate Exchange mailboxes in bulk after upgrading when the Exchange server is upgraded. So if we want to move mailboxes from a lower Exchange server version to a higher one, say from 10 to 16, then that can be done with AD Manager Plus. We just have to choose the target Exchange server and the mailbox database, and then specify which mailboxes we want to move with the help of our CSV file. And then we looked at how we can archive Exchange mailboxes. So again, all we had to do was we had to choose the appropriate attributes, and import our CSV file. Now, once our CSV file was imported, we were able to archive our mailboxes. And finally, we looked at some basic Office 365 management as well. We looked at how we could generate a report to list all the users who have been inactive in our Office 365 environment. And then with this list, we saw how we could revoke all the licenses for these users. So this is basically done for freeing up some licenses so that they can be assigned to new users that are joining the organization. Okay, well, that concludes today's workshop session. Thank you all for taking your valuable time. Thank you all for attending today's workshop session. Your participation means a lot to us here. So I'll be staying back again, like yesterday, for answering your questions. If you have any questions, please use the chat box and ask me your questions. I'll try my best to answer them now. And if I am not able to answer them now, I will definitely drop off a mail with the answers. Also, after the workshop session, you will all be receiving some feedback forms. So please do fill out these feedback forms and send them back to us. And we'll take a look at this and we'll try and implementing the we'll try and implement your feedback as well. So your feedback is very valuable to us. It helps us improve our workshop sessions. Once again, thank you all for joining today, and you guys have a great day. Thank you.